All right, let's go ahead and get started. I'll turn on my video so everyone can see me. There I am. It's nice to have everyone here. I think folks are going to be coming in as well. And let's go ahead and get started. So I'm very excited and happy to be presenting to this Learning Revolution event. The session title is Teaching with AI, Revolutionizing Education for the Future. And we started the recording. Thank you so much for our sponsors as well. Really excited that they were able to put this opportunity for us and excited to present to all of you as well. Once again, this session is called Teaching with AI, Revolutionizing Education for the Future. My name is Daniel Bernstein. I'm the founder and CEO of Teachally. I have been a software entrepreneur for years and years and years. I have a bachelor's in computer science and a master's in music of all things. I was a founder and CEO of a company called Sandlot Games that I started in 2002, sold in 2011. I'm the founder of Teachally, and the reason why I started with Teachally, the start of the company, is I married a dance teacher, and she started teaching during COVID. She started her own studio, and so what she wanted to do, and we actually had kids, so I saw kind of the whole process of what happens to kids during COVID on kind of firsthand, because that had a significant impact on our kids, and I wanted to have an impact on that. So one of the things that she told me is said, listen, I want to be able to send stickers and rewards to my kids. And so what we ended up building was a complete communications and rewards-based platform. You're asking yourself, what does that have to do with AI? But it'll make sense here in a second. So the reason why we did it is because our kids weren't engaged, so we wanted to have, essentially a solution for their teachers, but also my wife's kids were not engaged. So this whole system that we built was a data platform. It had obviously the reward system. It was kind of like a mini SIS that we're able to send all these rewards out to kids and communicate with the kids from both the teacher and parent side. So we built a system and we presented it to teachers, and teachers said, "Thank you so much. That's a really nice cake, but I'm actually drowning here and I need some help." Um, so thank you so much. Greetings as well. So I was like, okay, well, what's happening? And as I presented this system to teachers, um, teachers told me, well, listen, this is really, really great. I'd love to be able to do this, but for various kind of points in their career, they're like, we have no time to do any of this. One of them even told me, hey, I'm quitting next week. So you're barking up the wrong tree. So I said, there's a bigger problem that we're trying to address. So one of the things that we kind of talk about, AI, it's great, but really fundamentally, how is AI going to solve some of the problems that are inherent to teaching that I discovered in the process of building these two companies? Specifically, problems facing districts and problems facing teachers. So districts obviously face a teacher retention rate problem, a teacher quality problem. As you know, they're not able to retain the best teachers. They leave, they retire, and obviously that kind of percolates down to the learning continuity and being able to really support the kids within the schools in the district. Availability of resources. There's not a lot out there, honestly, especially for things that are, that are electives, social studies, etc. And, those resources are not very well aligned to the needs and requirements of students. And, when you kind of go beyond the very rich urban districts into smaller districts like, in Ohio or in West Virginia that we're working with, you get to find out that there's not that availability of resources. And a lot of times those resources, even if they're there, not aligned to district requirements, which change year by year by year. So this year it's HQIM, science of reading, it changes. As a result, the resources are no longer aligned to what they need to be. So problems facing teachers is really they lack resources and time to invest into building the very basics of lesson planning or teacher or teaching or creating these reteaching opportunities. They don't have a lot of support with from from admins or from curricula or whatever. And they actually need to take on themselves to have standards alignment, full standards alignment to whatever the state and and national requirements are. And if those resources that they're building are not standards aligned, a lot of times they're just not useful, right? They don't fit within a scope and sequence that's provided to them by the district. There's, as a result of not having any resources and time, there's not enough time for full differentiation for learners and personalized instruction. There's just simply not enough time to do any of it. As a result, engagement with the material goes down, down, down. So you get this situation where the cycle is inadvertently going down, 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 where the fewer engagement there is, the less interested the students become, and then you basically just have this downward spiral. So there are very serious problems. So when we think about what is AI and how do these platforms exist, I want to pose the question that they first and foremost need to address these points before we start talking about them just from, hey, what's this great gimmick that now we can actually play with. So just a brief history of AI for those of you who don't know. AI really started as a term that was coined in the 1950s. A term was called artificial intelligence. It was introduced at the Dartmouth Conference in 1956. And since that time, that was a very kind of academic exercise. Since that time, in the 60s through 2022, it went through this period of AI winters and revivals where there were kind of spikes of innovation, different methodologies of actually working with AI. I won't get into much detail here, but it's important to know that this is a long history of developing of these technologies. And that's something that's really, really critical to remember. And basically what happened is that, early on, it was really all about, these simple games like chess or checkers, and, back in my day, we were amazed that computers using AI were able to um, you know, beat grandmasters in chess, right? Nowadays, there's so much more that they can do. And so 2023 was really a breakthrough with the rise of these, what we call large language models or LLMs, an example of which is obviously ChatGPT. General AI models are general purpose large language models that are trained on a massive amount of info. Pretend like you have the access to all of the info that you can get on the internet, right? And you're able to absorb all that information and remember it all at the same time, and to actually kind of disseminate back and to analyze it and to be able to parse it. When it actually expresses and talks to you, it sounds like it was written by a human. But at the end of the day, the output is only as good as the person that is actually doing the prompting. So the question that I always pose is: Are teachers expected to be AI experts? Right? Is that another job description that they need to have? And fundamentally, these general AI models were taught, if they don't know, they have to basically infer. So if they can't get from point A to point B directly, they actually have to infer what that point B is, and that can lead to improper information, what we call hallucinations, especially when there's very little information that's given it, right? It is a people pleaser. It was trained to make sure that people are happy with what it provides. And sometimes, we all know that a lot of times, if you try to please somebody or make somebody happy, that doesn't necessarily mean telling them the truth. However, they do have guardrails. It is trained to refuse inappropriate requests, and it is trained to prevent these inappropriate requests by having a diverse data set, pre-training on biases. So, you have AI systems that actually have been trained on a constitution that keeps them from saying these really, really bad things or refusing to answer certain questions altogether. There's also been a lot of fine-tuning human review with guidelines, and that's what we talk about with the development of these models. And these models adhere to a certain set of values. That's where the constitutional AI comes in, specifically in the development of a general large language model called Claude. And they have been tested quite a bit. I apologize. I got something in my eye right before I started the presentation. So here we go. However, flipping back to what teachers need, which is the most important part. Teachers fundamentally need support because the best curriculum that they have is not sufficient. It could have been written 5, 10 years ago before they ever even thought of, the requirements of having, high quality instructional materials, or the requirements of having, you know, whatever is the latest important thing that needs to be done on a district level. There's a lack of time to create everything, and there's just no time for differentiation at all. So as a result, teachers go to Google research, they go to Teachers Pay Teachers, and in comes AI. And this graph will give you kind of a sense of reliability versus teacher flexibility as we see it here. So, the reliability of a resource, the most reliable resource that you can possibly get, obviously, is the school curriculum, right? It's been vetted, it's research aligned, all that stuff. But at the same time, it's not terribly flexible. It could have been written 10 years ago. So you've got all these kind of supplementals that come out every couple of years, a little bit more flexible. Sometimes they can give you 2 or 3 different kind of levels of differentiation. And then, if the teacher doesn't like what they see, they go on the internet. And then what I say, these naked AI prompts, they go on ChatGPT and they say, give me a lesson on binomials, right? And they get a lesson, right? Necessarily, it's not aligned, maybe not even grade specific. Maybe it's actually pulling in a standard that is not appropriate for the particular state in which they teach, right? So there's a flexible, but the reliability, may go down, and it may actually, invent certain things if it's not given all the information that needs to be given. And then, of course, they go on Teachers Pay Teachers, and then other teachers have created materials. They pull those. Again, lack of alignment, lack of standard alignment. A lot of times they may say, oh, this is a great eighth grade class, and this is actually a true story. A teacher pulled an eighth grade Teachers Pay Teachers resource. They thought it was eighth grade. The students loved it. Thought that was the greatest thing ever. And of course, it turned out to be a sixth grade lesson. The chat interface in practice is great. It's flexible. You can provide a lot of context, but um, it does not retain a lot of the information, especially when you close it down, you start over again, and basically you just have to start from scratch. It is prone to hallucinations, even though it is customizable. Out there, there's a new Teachers Pay Teachers. It's in the form of people selling prompt libraries, right? There are a lot of prompt libraries out there, but you do have to learn how to be a prompt engineer. So as a result, you have to ask yourself, well, this is nice, but I have to learn prompt engineering. And here's on the left a reason, kind of the questions that I put in. Why do I have to write prompts for everything? And that is, that is got really interesting. There's responses basically that ChatGPT does not have initiative. If there's ambiguity, they're looking for context to give it that ambiguity, to kind of address that ambiguity. All kinds of points there, as well as there are multiple models being developed. There are literally hundreds of these models. What we see out there on the internet with Claude and ChatGPT is really, the tip of the iceberg, right? There's Llama from Meta. There's new models being developed by Elon Musk, right? There are new models being developed at Apple and in Amazon, and that's great. But there are also hundreds of these other models that may not have been trained on a whole bunch of stuff that keeps them, keeps them at a moral center. So these models are constantly being developed everywhere, all around the world. Number one misconception. Let's talk about misconceptions. The number one misconceptions with teachers teaching with AI. Will AI replace teacher? The answer is a fundamental no. This is the reason. And if I didn't believe it, I wouldn't be doing this, right? At the end of the day, an AI cannot wipe away tears, cannot support and nurture a child in support of their learning journey. It can do this. It can draw it. It can create a lesson plan for it and can create some ideas, but it's not going to do this, which is why there will always be a teacher. But there's going to be more and more pressures on teachers. Teacher supports, things are not going to necessarily get better for teachers. So simply put, the efficiencies of using AI will make teachers happier and more productive. We're going to spend some time on AI misconceptions, specifically bias and misinformation, plagiarism, privacy, copyright. I've got this chart, and we're going to go line by line here in the next set of slides. So let's start with bias and misinformation. So this is where it's important to have guardrails for models. But at the same time, there are kind of inadvertent things that can happen. So here's an example. This is an image model, one that you provided, some text and it generates an image for you. So in this case, I asked it, hey, give me an image of a superintendent of a school district. And it generated some pictures of guys that look like me, men in their 50s and 60s. Perhaps that is reflective of a bias on the internet, of all, maybe media bias, et cetera, all the way down the line. Regardless, it's not who we want to be as a society, right? So we want to make sure that we actually think about it from a perspective of what do we want to be as people, not so much as what, really we kind of been reflected in the past. So in order to address the kind of diversity, equity, and inclusion aspect of it, what Google did is they actually included diversity, equity, inclusion into its model, into its release of its image model. So it said, hey, we want to correct these wrongs, but in an effort to do that, it actually created this problem where actually the model itself went back and actually started correcting historical things, right? So in this case, it was like, hey, great, I want to make sure that every image I generate is diverse. So it started generating Black Nazis or Native American medics in World War One that were women. Like there's all kinds of things. There were Vikings that were being generated. There were Asian. It's historically inaccurate things, right? So you've got this kind of teeter totter. You want to make sure you do the right thing, but at the same time, you also want to make sure that you do the thing that is going to propel our society forward. And this is where kind of this bias and misinformation can actually take hold in a much more subtle way than we can kind of think of it from a kind of firsthand perspective. Plagiarism. At the end of the day, there is no AI detection tool that's effective. I will say that right now. There's not a single one. And if you want an example of that, this was some months ago that OpenAI actually shut down its own AI detector. It discontinued its AI detector completely. And the reason why I did it, because it yielded inaccurate results, right? It launched an AI detector in March, and the tool that was aimed to detect was itself, not 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 very well received. It was, and then essentially OpenAI discontinued it due to inaccuracy, right? So at the end of the day, humans are the best AI detection tool, right? You want to make sure that you are creating this environment where you're doing peer reviews of information that comes in. This is kind of indicative of what I call the calculator moment. Remember when calculators came in 1986, and they were basically major protests all around the country saying, hey, calculators in the classrooms, it's going to be cheating, and then the world's going to be on fire. We're not going to be able to kind of preserve the learning journey. So teaching needed to be reformed. And in this case, this is another example where teaching also needs to be reformed because of AI. We need to think about student engagement much more strongly. In-class writing assignments to gauge interest, so to gauge students' knowledge, right? But more importantly, think about ways in which kind of we can think about these models differently, right? What about their personal reflection, right? If we put in personal reflection into what they're writing, obviously it leads to greater engagement with the content, but also, the AI doesn't know anything about them, so it makes them kind of own what they put together. Peer reviews, have kids debate. So this is an opportunity for us to really, really explore the content in a much greater way. That requires, obviously, to have the teacher supports to be able to have the time to create those activities. And that's where I think AI itself can come into play and help teachers. So personally identifiable information is information that, when used alone or with other data that's provided, can identify an individual. right? So for example, if I go into this IEP generator and say it's a fourth grade level class, this Johnny has a learning disability. That he's got dyslexia. He's fourth grade. He lives on 125th Street here in Newton, and his parents, are James and Cindy, and they live in this. So anyway, I'm just, obviously an example here that's a little bit over the top, but the idea is I'm putting in all this personal information. What happens when a large language model receives that personal information? It's actually training itself on the prompts you provide them. So critically, do not share your personally identifiable information with the models. And that's one of those things that is super, super, super important, right? You do not train, you don't want to provide the personal information because at the end of the day, it is actually in violation of HIPAA and FERPA laws, right? So you don't want to do this, and you don't want to, use tools that encourage you to do that. The other thing that drives me crazy about this particular IP generator is that it distills basically a child into a paragraph. IEPs shouldn't be taken lightly. It's a complex document that it requires, an oversight by a whole staff. So this is not something that I certainly recommend. Copyright, models have been trained on a wide variety of data, but we've seen some kind of these lawsuits that are coming out. So will OpenAI claim copyright over our outputs generated with the AI? The answer is no, right? But at the same time, model owners do offer protection. In the case of Claude, they will defend customers from any copyright infringement claims made against them. So this is a bit of a gray area. So the big caveat or the solution to this is really, to encourage teachers and folks to actually avoid selling the data that they've generated for commercial purposes. It may be used on their own to be able to teach their kids. So the guiding principles of what makes a comprehensive platform such as Teachally, you want to make sure you provide a personalized learning journey for kids, fully differentiated learning paths. You want to make sure that everything that you build is time savings, teacher upskillings, and co-teaching. So efficiency and automation are key. Standards alignment. So when I talk about standards alignment, a lot of folks say, hey, we align with standards, but they go out there and they actually pull the standards from the large language models themselves. How do you know those standards are up to date? So you need something that is actually a data store that stores the standards within the platform itself to make sure they're up to date and they're the latest, right? So if I'm teaching in Washington State and I say, hey, align it to a standard, it may actually pull a standard in from Texas, right? Unless I actually provided that information. So think of naked prompts as like, hey, give me a lesson on binomial theorem, and it actually generates a lesson that may or may not be compliant, kind of equivalent of you going down to the river, getting a glass of water, drinking the water. That's going to have a lot of impurities, right? So the impurities are, it doesn't have the context, or it doesn't know anything about the school. It doesn't know anything about the classroom. It doesn't know anything about you as a teacher. It doesn't know anything about the standard that you're trying to teach to, right? It can invent a standard or suggest a standard, but it doesn't know where you're trying to actually point this lesson toward. It doesn't have any resources. You may have, some documents that you want to pull in. So the more context you give the system, the better you get, and that's how you get a very, very focused output on the end. Here's an example of some folks that have been using our platform. Shane developed a full math unit, and one of the things that I think is critical is that gauge the platform not by the people that are actually really well versed in the curriculum, but ones that are being dropped in. Shane was dropped in ELA teacher, and he said next year you got to teach math. So within this 20-minute teaching session, he was able to, or PD that we put together, he was able to put together a full unit on mathematics that he's going to teach from next year. So that's critical. Again, but not just a unit in mathematics that he's going to teach from, that is standards aligned, that is curriculum aligned, and is going to be, fully functional, that he can read from and use.
Teachally.
All right, sorry about that. So what it does, it basically gets all of this input, filters that input into a funnel, and that funnel makes sure that it's aligned with standards. It generates units, lesson plans, teaching guides. I'll talk about why teaching guides are also important to lesson planning, enrichments, assignments, images, and even diagrams. Yes, diagrams that can actually show particular how a particular lesson or enrichment is being used. So structures are critical, right? So when we think about lesson planning, a lot of times we, again, outsource that whole idea to a large language model by typing in ChatGPT, but there are multiple research-backed lesson structures available to teachers that they teach from. Maybe you don't like to teach from kind of the traditional lesson plan. Maybe you want to teach from 5Es or a SciAp model, or if you're teaching from Bloom's, right? You want to make sure that those structures carry through and you start from that to be able to generate when you need to generate on the other side. And again, this will keep you from doing all this custom prompting and updating on the back end to be able to generate it all at once. Lessons should be comprehensive. In the case of Teachally, there's co-teaching capable, so all the lessons are kept in a single data store, and this is where the kind of experience that we have with Easy Stickerbook comes into play, where everything is stored within the database, where teachers can come in and generate enrichments from lessons previously created by other teachers, et cetera, et cetera. So a comprehensive lesson planning platform, co-teaching capable for maximum flexibility. And this is super critical because a system is able to collect all this data. It's able to generate its own context. Think of it, you're driving through, you're typing in, hey, give me a lesson on binomial theorem. That's like driving a Celica through. In this case, it's kind of like driving a semi. No prompting required. So we're able to actually generate lesson ideas without any prompting whatsoever. Here's an example of a lesson plan. It's going to use a lesson structure with the references. But more importantly, the teaching guide is critical. And this is something that I think we all need to make sure that we do when we think about lesson planning. The teaching guide will help teach the lesson. It will provide instructional outlines, misconceptions, facts, and more information how to properly align. Very often, teachers say, hey, here's a lesson plan. I'm going to send it over to the admin, and then I'm just going to get my own whatever information that I need from my from Teachers Pay Teachers or other places, and then how aligned is it, right? Is it a sixth grade level class? Lesson for an eighth grade class, right? So you get all this stuff that's not compliant, but making sure that the teaching guide is generated with the lesson, that it is compliant, it has all the skills and standards already built from that, or actually the teaching guide is built from those skills and standards, is super critical. References. So one of the things that we are able to provide is a curated set of references, not just a web search. So we're able to know, okay, this lesson plan and these websites are safe for this particular lesson plan, and we're going to generate the things that are important to provide to teachers so that they can have all these ancillary references for the lesson. And that's not just a straight web search. Obviously, assignments. If you have the context from the lesson standards, you can actually generate assignments without a single prompt. Standards are actually built into the platform. 400,000 state and national standards are in our database, all 50 states, CCSS, SEL, Head Start, CTE, AP, and others, and all the content that you can create within Teachally can be aligned to these standards. Enrichments are hundreds of activities, actually thousands of activities, and that actually includes enrichments such as high-quality instructional materials and science of reading. So this is a self-check toolkit, and this is one of the things that I think we want to make sure that I know I'm kind of running out of time here, so I want to make sure I can wrap up. Yep. So I'm not going to talk too much about some of the things that we're doing on that side, but I will let you know that one of the things that you want to make sure is that high quality instructional materials, that you're able to actually provide those high quality instructional materials and evaluate whether or not a lesson is actually within those constructs of that HQIM. Science of reading, also making sure differentiation, class or group level differentiation is critical, as well as making sure that you've got translation capabilities. Integration with a variety of platforms. This is something that a lot of AI platforms are still working through. Right now, we're able to generate a lot of text and we're able to kind of translate to Word, Google Doc, PDF, and Google Classroom. But make sure that you're actually, picking platforms that can actually do the kind of export to these types of models. And then obviously you can actually export to Canvas and Schoology. These are things that I think a lot of platforms such as ours are working on today. So that's all I have for today. Thank you so much. Just to give you a kind of a thank you here. My name is Daniel Bernstein. I'm the CEO of Teachally. This is my email, certainly my phone number if you would like to reach me. Happy to discuss at any point any questions that you would have. And thanks so much for listening.